The science of happiness is a very powerful area of study because if you think about it, almost all of us to a big degree are trying to be happy. That's basically, in a big way, what we're all just trying to be. Following your passion, doing what you love, marrying a wonderful spouse, having children, I mean, that all fits within that. So the study of happiness is extremely important. There are a lot of misconceptions as well, like many people think if you're extremely rich, that will bring happiness. That has been proven wrong over and over, and there are even sayings regarding that some people are so poor, all they have is money. Some people believe being exceptionally beautiful or having the ultimate body, where people absolutely admire and adore you, brings happiness. And yet, on the other side, there's some deep wisdom that's been really has been in existence since the start of history, and that is if you lose yourself in the service of other people, like Mother Teresa, maybe, that brings the most happiness. So, listen to these professionals talk about happiness and the concept of happiness. I think everyone should know about this.
Which is the philosophy of the Cleveland Clinic, and it's partially your philosophy, is you've got to measure it to be able to change it. And we'll come back to what we decided to go and measure for wellness. Everyone thinks it is bad genes that cause us all problems, and it is. But everyone in this room has bad genes. That is, I have defects in my genes, and everyone else here does too. And whether you survive or not, though, is dependent on how you manage those problems. Let me show you. All genes do is make proteins or watch other genes. So a gene is just a protein factory. But whether an individual gene is on or not is largely under your control. For example, colon cancer, there's a 52% 10-year survival in this group of patients who are on average age 55 when they got it, if they walked less than 30 minutes a day. But if they did walk more than that, there was a 74% 10-year survival. Same thing with breast cancer in a number of studies. Why does walking improve survival so much? Well, walking turns on a gene that makes a binding factor for cancer growth factors. So what you're doing with walking, just at this rate, you don't even have to walk hard or fast, is you change whether those cancers will grow, those cancer cells will grow or not, and change the rate at which you fight them versus they die. Your genes are like your geography. So San Francisco is built on 3 fault lines. If it had the same building codes of Cleveland, Ohio, it couldn't withstand a 2.9. But it doesn't. It changed its building codes, and it enforces them regularly, so it can withstand an 8.9 to a 9.1. Your genes are your geography. We all have fault lines. We all live with 2.9s, if you will. But whether we change our building codes and how we enforce them is the major determinant of whether those genes are expressed and we can withstand, if you will, the illnesses we get. And this study by Dean Ornish and Pete Carroll, our friends at San Francisco, of 52 patients with prostate cancer, is I think the most important I've seen in a long while. These are strips of genes, so there are 52 strips of genes on the pre-intervention side and 52 strips of genes on the post-intervention side, the same 52 people. And you'll notice if you look carefully, these are red. This is glucose uptake, and what happens is these genes are on and they're largely turned off. And what are these? These 5 are the RAS family of genes that cause promotion of colon, breast, and prostate cancer. So what did these men do? They did an intervention that largely turned these genes off. What was that intervention? It was walking 30 minutes a day. It was doing 5 minutes of stress management morning and evening, or 10 minutes a day, and it was not having 5 foods. No saturated fat, no trans fat, no simple sugars, no syrups, another word for simple sugars, and no grain but 100% whole grain. And the 3 people, by the way, who smoked quit smoking. That was the 4th thing they did. But that's all they did to largely turn the genes that cause promotion of cancer off. In addition, if you'll notice up here, these are green, and they went from off to on. And what are these 2? They're the GSTM1 gene that produces a protein that kills breast, colon, and prostate cancer cells. You get to change which of your genes are on or off to a large degree by your actions.
I had a really good friend of mine, I went to lunch, and he goes, let me ask you a question, honestly. Right now, what are you grateful for? And at the lunch I said, nothing, brother. There's nothing good in my life right now. And I'm not exaggerating this to you when I tell you this, and this is a factual story. As I'm mouthing these words, 2 people walked in with an older man. Both of them clearly were fighting cancer somehow. Both had lost their hair. One of the ladies had a bonnet on, and they were barely moving in. Both walked by our table and gave me the most warm greeting, the warmest smile as a stranger. And he goes, that's pretty freaking pathetic. You can't find anything in your life to be grateful for right now? And on the drive home, I'm not kidding you, I started to stack gratitude. I started to take inventory. Because if you can find things to be grateful for in that space, man, is your life going to be rich when there really are external things to be grateful for. So my first mechanism out of that space was honestly to stack the things I was grateful for, and I started reinforcing it over and over and over again. And what happens is there's this reticular activating system in our brains, right? And all of a sudden, because that's the messaging I was giving myself, all of a sudden, all these things start to come into my awareness that I'm grateful for. I start to magnetize to myself some people that I needed to find into my life, and that was the next layer. I started to see things to be grateful for. My health, my fitness, people who loved me. And what it is, it changed my state. When I stacked gratitude, I changed what I did in the morning, and I changed what I did in the evening. And so somehow by grabbing control of my morning and by grabbing control of my evening, I got some measure of control over the middle of my day. I was an out of control person back in those days, meaning this: I woke up worried, stressed, fearful, and I immediately start thinking about a bill I had to pay, something that was wrong, and I'm in a state of reaction to begin I'm talking within 6 minutes of waking up, 6 seconds. Most people listening to this, that's what they do. I said, I gotta grab control of my morning, and I set up routines in my morning. Maybe they served me, maybe they didn't, but they were things I could deliver on doing for myself. That which you do not hate, you will eventually tolerate. And I think that identifies most people's lives.
But it was not always this awesome. About 6 years ago, I lived a much different life in a much different way. I was emotionally and spiritually bankrupt. I lived the first 25 years of my life really looking for happiness and self-worth and connectedness in all the wrong places. I was looking for this connection and the inspiration in my credentials or in my relationships or in the amount of money or in a pair of shoes or in the fact that I had access to some great nightclub. Who knows? I was just looking for it in all of these outside circumstances. It got to a point when I was 21, I opened my first business, and I really felt as though I have arrived because now I have a credential that says I am doing something great in the world. But meanwhile, I just felt completely emotionally bankrupt. And so I continued on for about 5 years living in this way of running this business and living this fast-paced New York City lifestyle and having all of the necessary trappings of what it took to be a happy person, a person who had a lot going on. But in the midst of that, I was anesthetizing all of these deep-rooted fears and deep-rooted anxieties and terrible, terrible thoughts. Thoughts of inadequacy, thoughts of I'm not good enough unless I have a romantic partner. Thoughts of I'm not good enough if I don't get that new client or I have that amount of money. I'm not good enough because. I had a terrible case of the when I haves. When I have that new client, I'll be happy. When I have that new pair of shoes, I'll be happy. When I have that new relationship, I'll be happy. And when my when I haves became I haves, I was still unhappy. And then by the time I was 25, I was really trying to anesthetize all this discomfort with all of these different kinds of things, such as food and alcohol and romance and sex and money and, worst of all, drugs. By the time I was 25, I picked up a very, very bad cocaine addiction. And I was physically drained, emotionally deteriorating, and spiritually dead.
Look at this interesting example of this guy that had a very high-paying job as a lawyer, and he left it to serve children by being a teacher, where he thought he could impact other people's lives to a much greater degree. Obviously, sort of the opposite to what this young girl was speaking about, where she thought success, money, fame, whatever she could acquire for herself would bring happiness.
When I walk in, I'm excited. I'm just legitimately excited to see the kids, to teach the one I'm teaching. Good morning, Brianna. Good morning. Good morning, Melanie. I feel every day like I'm making a big difference in their life.
From the beginning of the year, I've always asked them, why did you become a teacher? Why did you become a teacher? And his answer was always simple. I want to help kids so they can go change the world.
Good morning, Harvard 6! Good morning! My favorite part of being a teacher is, without a doubt, when I see kids really feeling good about themselves because they feel like they're smart, because they've proven to themselves that they can do something they didn't think they could do before. I started my career as a lawyer. Over time, I realized I'm spending a lot of time at work, and I started to realize, like, is my time really doing anything for the world? Is it really bettering people's lives? I didn't necessarily feel that way when I was an attorney. I feel that way most of the time when I'm a teacher. What is this wagon attached to? What's pulling? I went to ed school. I discovered Excel Academy. There are kids from regular public schools, from all learning needs.
He left to be a lawyer, which you get a lot of money and like it's a very good job, to being a teacher. So I feel like very special to have a teacher like Mr. Pangburn teach me English. It's like we're important to him. He doesn't think about only him and himself. He thinks about other people too.
He picked us to teach because he wants to help children learn and grow.
Pablo. Starting as a teacher, I was going back to ground zero. I knew the English content pretty well, but that's not the issue. The issue is, can you break it down and explain it in a way that a kid's going to understand it? So I would call that figurative. It's very hard work. My lifestyle has changed just in that I don't have nearly the same, I guess what I would call discretionary income. I just have to be much more careful with how I spend my money and have to invest well. What else? I mean, it's coming from my heart. I mean, this is my sixth year doing this. I'm doing exactly what I want to do with my life. I want to see them feel good about themselves and really go on to go to college and make their community better, make their family better, and lead a great life.
He teaches us everything that we need to know to succeed in life, or at least helps us do it.
It's absolutely worth it to change careers because I think we have a limited life, and let's go do what we want to do. If you want to make a difference, go do it.
I want to be somebody. I want to be somebody that people look at and is like, I want to be like him. I realize that I can be that person.